So a lot of people have been asking, how has ACCA really impacted my life and changed my life? And the same questions have been asked to my colleagues, my faculties, my students. So in this video, we're going to talk about not the usual points of that it helped me get a job, it helped me learn finance. Finance is important for everybody. It's on none of the usual opportunistic points that are all related to ACCA. These are 3 points I'm going to talk about, which really has transcended the qualification or the domain of finance and helped me grow as a person, as an entrepreneur, as basically somebody who has to drive and manage a large number of people with a lot of aspirations. So before I jump into it, if this is the first time I'm visiting the channel, then please do subscribe. And if you've been visiting us, then thank you so much. We've been able to grow to one of the largest finance and accounting counseling handles on channels on YouTube in India. So the first point is ACCA turned me into hardcore solution-driven, solution-oriented person. This does not mean that I know to find all magic answers or any of us do. What it taught me was, as an exam, it forced me to not rote learn. It forced me to not selectively study. It gave me the ability to sit on a problem and I know that the answer exists, right? And it forced me to use all my mental faculties to figure out what the answer should be. And I made 100 mistakes, but the 101st time I got it. And then the next question I made less than 100 mistakes and I got it. And then so on and so forth. And it sort of forced me to believe, that most of the time solutions exist. We are much more used to complaining and finding reasons as to why we didn't find solutions by giving up and blaming internal or external factors. But more often than not, there are solutions. And I've seen a lot of people resisting that because we are not used to it. But this qualification really sort of tuned me into figuring that, as long as you put enough time, effort, great knowledge, thought into certain issues, problems, small or large, personal or professional, finance related or in life, most of the time you will find a solution. And this, by the way, is nothing to do with ACCA, right? This applies to MBA, CFA, IIT. That's why the top performers in the world generally have a powerful qualification on their CV because it teaches us how to not leave a problem, right? It teaches us how to figure out a solution, come what may, and that mindset is the number one takeaway. Point number 2, how to tackle problems, right? Again, our education teaches us that when we come across a problem, we're supposed to sort of bucket the problem under some category, and then we've been taught how to tackle that category, which means the more problems we learn, the more we sort of compartmentalize, the more we try to turn it into a structured system. That's how school has taught us. That if history, you learn dates, and on the last day of the exam, revise those dates because that's what easy marks as long if it's science, right? It's more about learning just enough to pass the exam. It's difficult for most of us to remember how to solve a problem which we had probably encountered back in 6th grade or 11th grade or so on and so forth. ACCA as a qualification, I'll give you all how I started learning, right? When I saw a problem, I would not know exactly how to start, whereas a lot of people would trained how to start the solution to the problem. So what I started doing is I would read a problem, and in the entire problem there might be 100 things which I have to understand. So I will catch the one thing that I know. Very high chance I'll know one thing out of the 100. Right? You catch that and you just solve that. Right? It doesn't matter if it's the start, middle, or the end. It's irrelevant. You start, and then from there you start figuring the next closest thing that you could understand from the problem, and then you basically, like a spider web, you start from that. You take the easiest thing you know how to solve and then go to the next easiest thing. It could be disconnected from your first solution. It could be connected. It doesn't matter. And then eventually you'll be able to come to a point where partial solution has been solved in bits and parts by you. And then you start connecting. And by the end of it, you have the entire solution. This mindset, this approach has helped me so much with any problem that I face, which I don't have an answer to. So it's sort of an extension of being solution oriented, but that is a mindset that we'll figure a solution, we'll work extremely hard. This is more technical. This is like, okay, how do I start with having no idea as to how to solve it? And that is a very crucial, you have to go where your expertise, where your knowledge, where your gut, you combine all of this and you say, okay, fine, in this big of a problem, let me just find something that I understand, start over there and then you figure your way out from there. And that approach, combined with the mental resilience that solutions are always available, sort of helps me solve any problem. That's point number two. And lastly, point number three is ACCA particularly is very strong, not only in teaching us accounts and finance, but it has improved my overall business acumen. I learned how to look at problems from an organizational perspective, not just finance and accounts. The strategic business leader paper is it's like a mini MBA. And the rest of accounts and finance is really a backbone of any business. And a lot of case studies, they gave up business case studies from the perspective of finance. But luckily, when I was studying it, I could see it not only from the finance perspective, but also from the business perspective. And it built a lot of clarity for me as to how to think. It took me a long time, by the way, guys. It took me a few years to realize, because while studying, again, my goal was to complete the exam. I was doing my internship, then I was looking for a great job. But over time, and by time I mean a couple of years, I started understanding how my thought, when I go to a restaurant, I don't anymore just look at the food. In fact, food becomes my lower priority. I start trying to understand the efficiency of the business. I try to make basic assumptions on the costing and what kind of revenue or profit the restaurant will be making. I try and understand the branding and the internal systems that they have set apart. Oh, can this be better? Can this be worse? And I've become very strong at understanding how businesses work in at least bits and parts enough to make sense of the entire business. This constant thinking, whether it's in the government entities, whether it's international brands, whether it's a local, street vendor, I think on business terms for all things in life, and it all stems from my knowledge of ACCA. So I think these three are much more important than just passing an exam and getting a job, because it's changed the way I look at life. It's turned me into a person who feels that giving up is not really something that needs to be done. It's not a willpower thing. It's not a ego thing. It's just that I've started getting used to the fact that most of the time you don't need to give up. You do find solutions as long as you're at it, as long as you do your best to figure out how to tackle the problem. And when it comes to business, as long as you're trying to look at it from all perspectives and you're continuously thinking about it, that's how ACC has changed my life. I am what I am today because it started with this qualification. I'll be ever grateful. But I want all of you to know it's not about ACCA. Like I said earlier, it could be any qualification. It's the way you're taught to structure thinking, right? And that, I think, will change a lot of you guys' lives.